Hey guys, project-zodiac here. I'm back with another video, and this is another movie review, and this is my review for Superman 2. So for this review, I'm not going to be talking about the Donner cut. I'm going to be just talking about the regular theoretical cut. And there's a lot I have to say about it. So spoiler free, very quick answer for my general thoughts on the movie is that there's a lot of things that are done right, but then a lot of things that are butchered. And then the ending section is really, the pacing for it is very off putting compared to the rest of the movie. But yeah, it's still a very good movie. It's still very fun, still very charming, but there are some issues with it. So those are my quick thoughts on Superman 2. Again, I'm reviewing all the original Christopher Reeve Universe Superman movies in anticipation for the newest Superman movie that's coming out in July. So with all that said, if you want to stick for my in-depth thoughts, please do. If not, then thank you for at least watching the intro. And here are my quick thoughts. But with all that said, now let's go straight into my in-depth thoughts on this movie. There's going to be a little bit of some spoilers, but this is a very old movie, so just, yeah, I think it's okay that there's spoilers. With that said, let's just go straight into it. The things that I love is, of course, Clark is played fantastically by Christopher Reeve, and a lot of the Superman moments and Clark moments are done really well. And I absolutely love the moment where Lois learns that he is Superman, and you can tell that he finally has the chance to fully be himself to someone, not just Clark or not just Superman, that he's able to be himself fully. And the conversation that he has with Lois in that dinner scene, it is really well done and really nice. I do think a lot of the moments with Lois was pretty good, uh, but a lot of them aren't, and I'll explain why in a little bit. And also, in terms of just the way that the villains are, I thought that they did something really unique with the villains, and I really liked it. They're just kind of there, kind of like learning about their powers, but then at the same time, just kind of being menacing and like telling people, like if you don't, like bow to me, then this whole plan will be gone. And you know that they can do that because they're basically like Superman. So it can be a little bit intimidating, and I thought that that was really well done. However, we'll get into that with my complaints as well, because that's another one of my complaints. But another thing that I liked a lot with this movie was the ending fight itself was really good. The fight itself was really good. Again, we'll get to the ending in a little bit. And I also really love what this movie did in regards to Clark as a person, where he decides to become human, or, well, I mean, to not have his superpowers in order to be with Lois. And I thought that that was really well done. And the scenes where we see him as, like a regular person feeling pain and not knowing how to react to it, I thought that that was so good. That was really impressive, because really for the first time in his life, he's felt pain. He's felt what it's like to bleed. And yes, in the last movie, he feels really weak because of the kryptonite, and, people can hurt him like that. But this is different. So it's not with kryptonite, it's just him completely being caught off guard by how pain is. And I thought that that was really interesting to see. I also really like that he told Lois that he's Superman, and the way that it was done, I think, pretty nicely as well. And yeah, just, the overall fact that we also got to see him spending time with his biological mom, his blood mom, through the crystal memories. I thought that that was pretty cool as well. But, then we get into the complaints I have with this movie. So this movie tries to be bigger and grander than the first one, but there's such a big essence of the first one that is missing in this one. And I think that that's the care. because this movie has some really cool things, like I had just mentioned, but those really cool things are just butchered badly. And so let's go into that. For example, first of all, Lois. Yeah, it's really cool that she finds out that Clark is Superman and then wants to be with him, and then she says that she's not going to tell anyone about his secret identity and all of that. So that's cool, but they butchered that because in this movie, Lois goes from, like, comparing the last movie, where the last movie she was witty, she was smart, she was really cool. In this movie, she's just really braggy and annoying and just kind of selfish and rude, especially to Clark in a lot of ways. So I didn't really like how she was written in this movie. It felt very different from how she was written in the first movie, and like almost a totally different character. Usually I let those things slide, it's not really too much of an issue, but considering she plays such an important role in this movie, it sticks out a lot, especially with how they treated her. Because, like, for example, when Clark gets beaten up at the restaurant, and then he just has to go to the Fortress of Solitude, where is she? She doesn't follow him. She doesn't go with him. She lets him walk in the freezing cold, however far away it is, to the fortress by himself. And they get there with a car. So why doesn't she, why can't she just drive him there? Like, so there was things like that, and it's not really explained. But we'll talk about that because that's one of the bigger issues, which is things not being explained, which is honestly just the script itself. So we have that, and so I did not like the way that they handled Lois in this movie. She's very different and really rude, and just not like how she was in the first movie. Also, the way that she's written, yeah, like her moments with Clark, knowing that he is Superman, supposed to be really nice. Their dinner scene was very good. It's very beautiful. He sacrificed his powers to be with her. But then again, that goes into the writing stuff. Why? We'll talk about that because I have a whole rant about the writing. So, but yeah, that whole section of her being there with Clark and hearing the story fully now and him being able to be himself, and she's just kind of like, I don't want to say bored, but just kind of like, like caught off guard, but also just, oh, you're Clark. I don't like Clark. I like Superman. And Superman is Clark, but Clark is annoying. She even asks him, so do you even like being Clark? Like, that's what I mean. So like the way she's written is, even during those scenes, it really does not feel like she cares for him as a person. She only cares for him because he's Superman. And when she finds out that he's Clark, she's just kind of caught off guard by it, but then just really turned off that he's Clark, and then being conflicted if she should be with him because he's Clark or not. So that's things that makes no sense. And then at the end, she starts saying that she's not going to tell anyone his identity, and that, they'll work with it. But then the very next scene, it's her going into a panic mode saying, oh, I want to hug you. And but people can't know that I'm hugging you, because then they're going to start questioning why I'm hugging you, or holding your hand and all of that. We work together. And then she just like starts saying all these random things which makes no sense. And she starts saying that she was up all night crying, and that she can't give him affection, and it's just some very stupid things that makes no sense at all in how she was written, especially towards the ending. And then that is what leads to Clark kissing her to erase her memory. And then it's not clear if he erased everything of their adventure together, or if he just erased the fact that she knows he's Clark, or sorry, that she learned that he's Superman. So I personally think the only thing he did was just erase that she learned he was Superman, but still remembered everything with Superman. And that we'll talk about in the next movie. But yeah, I thought that the way that they handled Lois and Clark in this movie was terrible, especially towards the ending. The beginning parts was okay, but towards the ending, they just butchered how they handled her and how her reaction was to everything. It really just doesn't seem like she cares for Clark at all. So, yeah, I didn't really like that. Another thing that I really didn't like is they brought back Lex, and I don't really know why they brought back Lex, because again, he wasn't always my favorite part of the first movie. But to make it worse, his friends, the henchmen, one of them stays in jail and disappears, but then the girl, I forgot her name, but she goes with him to the Fortress of Solitude, and he somehow finds the Fortress of Solitude. Okay, like he makes a comment saying that he knows Superman flies north very often, but it's like, okay, that's fine. He goes north, but what makes you think that it was to the Arctic and to exactly the pinpointed location of the fortress? How do you get to that? So that is something that, the writing for this was also really bad. But then after he enters the fortress, and his friend, the girl that's there with him, that was in the last movie, she, after that scene, never is mentioned or seen again, which I don't know why. It makes no sense. So yeah, that was one scene. And like the movie kind of just made Lex be in it so that he can just direct Zod to it. But then, like, why would Zod even want to follow Superman? Because literally when they're fighting at the end, Zod just lets Superman go. It makes no sense. And then you can argue that Superman was planning on them following him to the fortress, but I don't think that he was, because he doesn't make any real mention of that. So he just goes to the fortress, then Zod shows up because of Lex. So it really just made no sense. And then Zod and the other Kryptonians, they're cool, and I love the fact that they're just kind of standing there and people going crazy around them and they're not really doing anything. But my complaint with them is, at the beginning parts of the movie that makes sense, but then with him saying that he's gonna take over the world, like, yes, we know that you are capable of doing so because you're a Kryptonian, but you are literally just standing there, and everybody keeps talking about Superman coming to stop you. So why is everyone just quickly, like going to follow Zod when he really doesn't do anything? The only time that he actually does something that is actually threatening is when he's fighting with Superman towards the end, right before the final fight inside the Fortress of Solitude. That fight in the town was really well done. It shows how tense Zod can be and how impactful it is. It was done really, really, really good. So it's like, why did you wait the whole movie for this guy to just stand around? We know that he can be intimidating, but he's just standing. Why can't he do something to show, like, remind us that he is intimidating and powerful? But then the complaint with that big fight is the way that there's humor put into it that sticks out so badly, and it's really, really bad humor. It's literally like slapstick humor, but done in a very off-putting way. Like, you have this whole serious situation about these two, super-powered people fighting each other. One of them is trying to hurt people and, causing strong winds where people are flying. And then you just randomly show a guy sliding on the street, holding onto a phone as he's sliding, but then other people are screaming. And then you cut to that, and then you show another person with, like, ice cream trying to eat the ice cream as Zod's wind is coming. Like, it just makes no sense at all. It wasn't funny. It wasn't, like, yeah, slapstick comedy. I grew up watching a lot of that, but like there's a place for it where it makes sense. And even in serious movies, you can have a slapstick comedy in a serious situation, but you have to know when to use that. And then here, it's just randomly there in the most obvious and awfully put way. And it's not funny, it's not even forced. It's just like, what is the point of that? Like, why is that supposed to be funny in this context? Even if it's slapstick comedy, it doesn't even fall under slapstick comedy. It just comes off as something totally not needed or something totally unnecessary. So that was very distracting. And then, yeah, they just completely butchered a lot of that, because there's a lot of scenes in this movie where they're being humorous forcefully, and then there's a couple of scenes where they're being humorous in a more natural way. But I don't understand why they went in this direction. Now, obviously, I do actually understand that the reason is because there was two different directors involved in this movie. Richard Donner, who directed the first one, was directing most of it, and then he got fired, someone replaced him, and that person did a lot more slapstick comedy. That I know. But what I'm trying to get at is I don't understand why that director thought it would be such a good idea to put a slapstick comedy during this important, serious moment. It just did not make sense at all. Now, I still haven't seen the Richard Donner cut. I'll probably watch that later, but I'll do a review for that later, because right now there's a bunch of movies I have to watch to do reviews for. So I heard it is better, but there are still things that was in that movie that is in this version, the theatrical version. So I don't know how much better it will be, but I guess, according to the fandom, it's extremely better. Another complaint that I have here is the special effects. There's a lot of special effects in this movie which does not really make sense, because it is way worse than what the first movie special effects was in many parts. And then also, of course, everyone talks about Superman's random powers in this movie, which is, like the memory erasing kiss, the S-shield wrap thing, the multiple Supermans in the fortress. And yeah, I get it. Comic book purists will be definitely complaining about that, and a lot of it does seem pretty strange. But look, considering this is a adaptation, and in the last movie we see him flying around the Earth to literally reverse the rotation of the Earth to make time go backwards, which sounds, pretty cool. When you put it into the movie, it works. It's pretty cool. I can honestly let all of that, extra power slide, but it is very confusing because we know that Superman in the comics doesn't have this. So for general people who don't read the comics, they're just going to think that that's pretty cool. For people who do read the comics or who knows more about Superman, they're going to be very confused as to why they added these powers. But again, it's not exclusive to just this movie, because all of the Superman movies in the Christopher Reeves universe give Superman unique powers for the movies. So honestly, it is a little bit strange here, but as the series goes on, you kind of just get used to it. In terms of the S-shield and the multiple Supermans, I would say that maybe that was just the multiple Supermans could have just been something regarding the fortress, or maybe it's just something as part of the suit. The S-shield, I think, definitely would have been part of the suit as a weapon or a defensive thing, like a built-in thing. Now, it doesn't make sense because he doesn't have gear on his suit, but, well, think about it. He has all the information of Krypton, so when he was in that 12 years of training, he probably learned how to incorporate things onto his suit, which could also explain why his suit just magically appears and disappears randomly throughout the first movie, this movie, and other movies in the series. So it's not like him just going fast and then changing underneath it. Sometimes it literally just appears over his other suit. So it's not like it's under the suit. Sometimes it is, but then other times it's literally just, it manifests on top of him. So I like to just headcanon it as the suit has some Kryptonian technology in it, which also explains the S shield that he tosses. Again, it works. But then, yeah, we gotta go into the biggest complaint here, and that is the script. Because there's a lot of things in this script that just makes no sense or that was not done right. Again, Zod being one of those things. He should have been a lot more forceful and intimidating with his abilities, especially towards at least half of the movie. Then we have things with like Lois and how her writing was, which makes no sense. And then we have the biggest things, which is how is it that Clark got his powers back? Because his mom tells him that he can't get his powers back if he goes through that process. How does he though? He walks back to the fortress, and then the next thing we see is him flying in and fighting Zod. But how did that happen? There was no explanation given to it. And then what about, for example, how did that he knew how to change the effect of the Fortress of Solitude's memory, or not memory, power erasing light thingy, in order for it to affect outside of the chamber rather than inside, so that way Zod and his companions could be affected rather than Clark, and then so that they could be like regular people. How is it that he knew how to change that? Because his mom didn't explain that. So how did he get that information? He only learned about that chamber in this movie when he was going to be with Lois. And then there's that whole thing about Lois. So what was the point of him being regular in order to be with Lois? Which honestly, it doesn't make sense. Like, the world would need Superman, so he's not going to be Superman so that he can be with Lois. Well, why can't he be Superman and be with Lois? Well, he might hurt her given, his strength is different than everyone else's. So he probably, gave up his powers to not hurt her physically by accident. Well, Clark has lived his whole life knowing how to control his strength. So I don't really think that makes any sense or would have even been an issue. So yeah, it really makes no sense. And then he says that he did that for them, but why? And then Lois kind of doesn't even appreciate that either. And again, that just made no sense. And then the time that they have with Clark as a regular person is literally just one scene. It's like, I don't even know, like 6 minutes long. And it's literally just the scene of him with Lois in the restaurant. Okay, so right away, he becomes regular, sees the news about Zod just a few hours later, and then goes and becomes Superman again. It's like, okay, well, we see absolutely nothing other than him feeling pain for the first time. So that was such a wasted, really cool concept that they could have gone with. And Lois's and Clark's relationship was also wasted in how it was written. Zod's situation was wasted in how it was written. And then the battles were wasted because of the humor. So there's a lot of issues that this movie had, which just makes no sense, and it just comes out of nowhere. And again, it's mostly, I guess, towards the ending of the movie that these issues become more and more present. And I'm not really one to nitpick on certain things like that, but it was so obviously and distracting in this movie that I had to complain because it made no sense. And that's not what this movie deserved. It's not what Christopher Reeve deserved, or even Superman, or even those characters. So I think it was really, really badly handled. Now, again, I know that there's a whole thing with the production of this movie that was a factor into it. I know that it's explained in the Donner cut how Superman gets his power back. I know that the way that the ending of the Donner cut is different. I know that there's a whole bunch of differences between this and that. But again, I haven't seen that one yet. I've only seen this one. So I can only really talk about this one. But does that really mean that this movie was bad? No, it doesn't at all. This movie was still very fun, very good, and very enjoyable. You know, if I give like Superman 1 like an 8 out of 10 or an 8.5 out of 10, then this one I would give it like maybe a 6 or 6.5. Again, in these reviews, I don't really like to give a score. Uh, when I watch the movies and I write them, I give them a score. But for these reviews, I just want to give my thoughts and let you guys go with the thoughts rather than a score. But yeah, I'm just explaining that range just so that you can see that the movie, even though I'm making it seem like it's really, really bad, it's not. There are a lot of good things here. The things that they do right is done so good, but then it's just butchered by the production, the script, and the directing. But still, it's a very fun movie. It's not my favorite of the sequels, which honestly will surprise you all which ones it is. Uh, but it is still a very fun movie. So, with all that said, guys, that's my review on Superman 2. Up next will be my review on Superman 3 because I do consider it part of the canon of the Christopher Reeves movie. So, with all that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about this movie. Where you come subscribe, and I'll talk to you later. Have a good day.